This is the October 15, 2025 edition of Breaking the Line, the ECNL podcast, featuring ECNL President and CEO Christian Lavers and ECNL Vice President and Chief of Staff Doug Bracken. Christian and Doug, in addition to talking about the U.S. Under-20 team for a few minutes today, will talk about the changing economics of sports, both sports generally, but specifically youth sports. More than $50 billion are spent on youth sports annually in this country. So let's not mess about. Let's get this conversation started. So to do that, I turn it over to Christian Lavers.
Thank you, Dean. The silky smile, the smooth voice, and everything else that makes Dean Linke the voice of the ECNL and many more things.
If you're watching college soccer on TV, you're seeing it and hearing it a lot lately. Dean's been on a lot of games.
Is there such a thing as too much Linke?
Big game tomorrow, Christian. Dean Linke on the call. Big Ten men's soccer, Ohio State versus Michigan.
In Columbus.
Columbus.
For the Big Ten tournament title game that springboarded the Buckeyes all the way to the College Cup.
That's right. And since Michigan can't seem to win a football game, maybe this kind of football will be a game.
Yeah, it wasn't a good weekend for the Wolverines out in Southern California. That's a fact.
That's right.
But it was not a good game for the Bengals either, having been
the Bengals
around by the Packers.
Yeah, the Bengals stink. No Joe Burrow, no.
Well, that's not very nice to say. Joe Flacco just came all the way over there to try and help you guys out.
I thought the guy did a good job. It gave me like a tiny glimmer of hope. But I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think it's going to happen.
All right. Well, other news in the soccer world: the U20s just knocked out of the U20 World Cup in the quarterfinal by Morocco. Doug, any comments on that?
I was surprised. I did watch a little bit. The US were quite good leading up to it. I thought they'd get through this time, but they did not. This seems to be their kind of perennial stumbling block for whatever reason. I think last 4 World Cups they've got knocked out in the quarterfinals. So
Jacob, can you get us some dates on that? Are the last 4 World Cups we've been knocked out?
Absolutely. The U20s have made the World Cup quarterfinals each of the last 4 World Cups, which is every 2 years. So that'd be 25, 23, 21, and 19. The last time they made it to the semifinals was in 1989.
1989.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's an interesting fact, right? Because as we were just talking about before we went live here, to the average listeners, a quarterfinal is a good run, and it might make you think, hey, well, does that mean that there's a big, for lack of a better words, the next generation coming up is in a different spot than previous generations? And the answer, without any judgment, is that we've basically been blocked at the quarterfinals for a long time, and you got to go back now. 1989. That's like, what is that?
That was
40 years.
That was my freshman
35.
year.
35 years to have gotten before that. So for whatever reason, and this is a different topic probably, but for whatever reason, success at the U20s doesn't necessarily translate into success with the full team. So there's still, which shouldn't surprise us, right? If we also talk about how, signing pros below the age of 17 is almost a complete wild card in terms of who ultimately makes it. So you still got a lot of shaken out of players who are selected for a U20 World Cup and whether they end up being good enough and selected for a full World Cup. Because we've only been to the quarters one time in the full World Cup. That was back in 2002. So that was not any time near the 1989 semis of the U20s. And that did not precipitate anything different in the last 10 years of getting to the quarters. So interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. We're getting there and we're progressing and we're getting that experience in those games. I think that's useful. We'll see if it translates, moving forward.
You could ask a question. Morocco's been on the rise at multiple levels, right?
Mm-hmm.
In world soccer. So Morocco getting past us in the quarters in some ways is not a surprise, and that again begs a whole bunch of questions when you start comparing countries and trajectories and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And I believe the U17, I think they call it the Women's World Cup. I think it's girls. U17s will be happening this fall as well, right? Coming up soon. I think a lot of our ECNL players playing and representing the US in that. So that'd be interesting to see how they do as well.
Yeah, we'll unpack that when we get closer because not only will the U.S. be well represented with a lot of ECNL alums or current ECNL players, actually, there will be a lot of other countries, I would imagine, that will have players with connections to the United States. But before we go leave the U20s, well, we've got a league alum that did really well in the U20s for the U.S. So, Jacob, you want to give us give us the deets on that?
Yeah, one of the standouts for the U20s was Josh Winder. He's a Louisville City Academy alumni. He played 2020 and 2021 in the ECNL, but he spent several years before that coming through the Louisville Academy. So he's been a standout. Matt Doyle had a lot of praise for him. Soccer America did a really good feature on him as well. And he was one of the players who played for the U20s 2 years ago when they made the quarterfinals and they got knocked out. So there's a little bit of unfinished business for him, but he had a really strong play at the U20s, and he's hoping to turn that into Portugal, where he's playing right now.
All right, so a good shout out to Lou City there on a guy going places.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good for that. All right, Christian, you ready to dive into this today?
I am ready to dive into it, Doug. What are we diving into?
Well, today we are going to tackle the subject of the changing economics of sports. I think our focus obviously would be on youth sports because that's where we reside, but just sports generally. And I guess I would start by saying that youth sports is a massive industry in this country. It's over $50 billion in youth sports in the US. So maybe we start there, like at a bigger picture. And you can kind of start taking us down the road. And then, as we kind of come into things that we want to talk about as it relates to the ECNL and youth soccer versus other sports, we can get into that as well.
Yeah, so I think on these tricky topics, I like to start with the caveat that we're just going to provide some facts here and some background without judgment to some degree. There's pros and cons to everything. And I know there will be plenty of people who have opinions on this, some very nuanced and educated, and some quite naive. But the reality is that the economic model of youth sports is in the middle of a dramatic change that I think, for lack of a better phrase, is defined by the entrance of private equity or big business coming into youth sports, and that is going to change the structure of sport. Again, some can be very good, some can be not so good, but it is not specific to soccer. In fact, you could argue there's other sports that are probably farther along that curve than soccer is in terms of the consolidation under private equity or big businesses. And, you might even say that is because those sports were even more fragmented or less developed than the youth soccer industry, for lack of a better word. But it's coming. It's not on the horizon. We're right in the middle of it. The wave is here. And I think it's helpful to understand why that is happening. And then we can talk about what it may mean for operators, for parents, leagues, clubs, all that sort of stuff. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. Talk about, I think first talk about, just so people understand, when you say private equity, like, give us what is that? What does that mean?
So let's use private equity as sort of we're using that in the almost a term of art here, but it's the consolidation of funds or cash that is being used to purchase assets, businesses and other assets, and consolidate them under one economic model, one operating structure. And so when you look at generally across any industry, what you have is, if you say the private equity playbook is to find a fragmented industry with thousands of small single operators that exist independently. And because they're small and independent and all over the place, there's very little economies of scale. There's inconsistencies and inefficiencies in operations, and there is significant opportunity to generate more return through consolidation into a bigger entity with more purchasing power, better controls and processes, which also generates more efficiency in terms of return. And if you look, and that's true, you can look at that in, it's occurred in waste management, it's occurred in home storage, it's occurred in a lot of services-oriented businesses where this type of consolidation is happening. It's happening in healthcare. It's happened gigantically in healthcare. If you look, the small mom and pop medical practice doesn't really exist anymore. And
farming's another one, right? Where they've had major consolidation. Yeah.
So if you look at that sort of as the basis of agnostic to industry, which is fragmented, small, thousands of operators, independent, little shared anything. The playbook or the recipe is to come in with a lot of cash, so an equity fund, or in substitution for private equity, you could just think of big business, or big investor coming in and buying a lot of these independent operators, and then by doing so, combining the operations. So number one, you eliminate redundancies. So you eliminate overlap or duplication of effort. There's a cost savings on there. By buying more services of whatever it may be, you have cost savings, right? Because the more you purchase, the more power you have in terms of price. You professionalize operations, which generates other returns and efficiencies. And then you also have the opportunity to bring discrete revenue flows under one entity. So where you may have in independent operations, if we go like all the way back, 20 years ago, and you're operating a youth soccer club in this country, you go to one vendor to buy your trophies for your tournament. You go to another vendor to set up food. You go to another vendor to buy signs. You go to another vendor to get your uniforms or to sell your apparel at the event or for your club. Now, fast forward from that into the modern day, you go to one vendor to do your technology. You go to another vendor to do your travel. You go to another vendor to do, your whatever other collateral revenue or operations you have. You could go into services like even things like performance training or medical or athletic trainers or anything that has revenue flows and expenses attached to it. You start to combine them, and by combining them across a variety of functions and services, you also have opportunity to generate more return. So what you ultimately have is an industry of independent soccer clubs, independent leagues, independent organizations. Some operated better than others, for sure, but small. And this has been going on, I would say, 5, 7 years. Maybe you have a different opinion on that, because you've seen this consolidation, and it happens at multiple levels. It can happen at a town level or a city level, where a club, I mean, this is the rise of the mega club or the super club, whatever you want to call it, that acquires or takes over the other clubs around it. And so 5 independent clubs and independent communities that are next to each other become one big club that operates across all 5 communities. There's savings there, there's value there, economically and with respect to service potentially, right? Because if you look at, 5 independent clubs, there's pros to that. One of the cons to independent clubs is you tend to have a bigger range of talent within each age group because you have a smaller catchment area or a smaller pool. So there are some positives to it that are outside of economics for sure. But you see that happening in the club space for the last several years. You see it happening in the league space, right? There used to be A lot of independent small leagues. You're seeing more and more consolidation of that. People could point to the ECNL, saying the ECNL is consolidated league operations in a big way. I mean, if you look back at our beginning in 2009, right? 40
Yeah.
clubs, three age groups, one gender, to now 120,000 plus players playing within the league. That happens in some ways through consolidation and growth that we've never acquired anybody, right? So
Yeah,
there's
it did, and
competitive forces.
it hasn't happened through private equity,
Correct.
right? We
Correct.
just grew,
ECNL's a nonprofit.
we
Yeah.
just grew it. So, understood. And, I think, again, you look at the highest levels of sports in general, and there's a lot of private equity attached to professional sports. There are at least 10 teams in each of the professional sports leagues that
Well,
have
hold on, Doug. Before you go there, let's also say why is this happening in youth sports now?
Yes, I was just going to come back to that.
Okay. All right.
I
Go
was going
ahead.
to come
Maybe
back to that. Just giving people,
circuitous path.
I was given the big picture. Um, each of the professional sports leagues, there are 10 teams that have private equity attached to them. The highest is the NBA, 20 out of 30. The lowest, NFL, 10 out of 32. You've heard conversations now with NIL about colleges, and the that kind of talk of investment in athletic programs at universities. So there are a number of examples of this everywhere around the world in sports.
Well,
So
and again, you asked earlier, what is private equity? And basically, what we're talking about is capital or cash from big organizations, pension funds, retirement accounts, very, very wealthy people
nation
that come,
states.
nation states. That's true. You go
That's
to the
true.
EPL, you got lots of
Yeah.
nation states running clubs that basically come into an industry, use that capital and resource to buy a variety of different assets, combine them, and then ultimately look to sell that new combined larger company for a significant return, typically in the 3 to 7 year time horizon.
Okay. So now let's zoom in and talk about how it's coming into youth soccer.
Well, how and why, right? And
Yeah,
so
how and why.
the why is partially the structure of youth soccer and youth sports, and that's the fractured, independent, inefficient type of baseline that you have in the industry. But then the second thing is, as you said earlier, Americans spend a lot of money on youth sports. They spend a lot of money on kids, right? And I think
Yeah.
Jacob's got some data on just anything at this point, but anyone with kids knows that whatever you do with them is expensive. School is expensive, especially if you go to a private school. Music lessons are expensive. Sports is expensive. Vacations are expensive. Entertainment is expensive. Taking them to dinner is expensive. People spend a lot of money on kids, and we probably won't have a citation on this, but I do believe there's been some studies that say, or surveys in a recession or a bad economic outlook, parents, the last dollar they will try and cut is what they spend on their kids.
Yeah.
Right. And there's huge positive things to that, but that collectively means that, you can probably look at a variety of, AI models that'll give you numbers from 30 to 40 to $50 billion a year being spent on youth sports, depending on how you define that expenditure, right? Because some of that is through registration fees, some of that is through equipment, some of that is through travel. I don't even know if travel would go into that. I would assume in some ways. So you have huge money overall being spent on these very fragmented industries. You have people who want to provide for their kids and they want to provide the best possible thing they can for their kids. They're going to do it year after year after year, whether they're in one sport and they continue down that path or whether they veer from one sport to another. And then you look at the costs now of providing a service in youth sports are significant, and therefore the revenue flows attached to them are significant. It is not cheap to pay experienced, qualified people to spend hours and hours and hours a week, a month with kids, to pay for facilities, lights, turf, good grass, whatever it may be,
Yeah.
to pay for the equipment that goes along with that. And all of the collateral stuff that as you get older and into higher levels, you start adding on more and more other things to it to in the interest of development, exposure, or whatever it may be. But when I think, we have some very rough data that says the average cost of being in a, let's call it an elite level, or an ambitious level. I don't know, that word elite gets thrown out a lot. Athletic program, basically the floor you're going to get is $3,000 is the expense that you're paying a year for your son or your daughter to play sports, whether that sport is soccer, baseball, gymnastics, volleyball, hockey, whatever it may be. And when you start saying thousands of dollars per kid year over year, with a lot of people who have their kids in one sport or another, that's like, a bullseye for investment.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you rightly like said at the beginning, when you talk about a fragmented industry or landscape, it is ripe for consolidation. And I think that's what, that's what you see um, happening in youth soccer. Now, I would say, well, tell me what your thoughts are about that.
About what specifically?
About because I think we have some pretty we've said some thing, our values or whatever, however you want to say it. We've said some pretty specific things over the years, continuously about our desire to have youth soccer people running youth soccer, stuff like that. So, I mean, what are your as this inevitability happens that it continues to come in, um, like what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think to the first point, it's important to recognize that this is inevitable. It's already happening. It's going to happen more. And there's nothing that anyone's going to do to stop it. And that is because of the economic forces aligned. And again, if you go back 25 years, we've joked about this. And if you were starting to coach in the early 2000s or late 90s, there wasn't a career path for a club soccer coach, or probably in almost any sport,
No.
because people weren't spending money on sports to the same degree that they are now. And again, the purist is going to have one opinion on that, but a developmental utopian will have a different opinion potentially, because you need resources in order to provide environments. But do you need expense in order to provide a good experience? No, not necessarily. But this is happening because people want to do things in sports with their kids because they see outcomes for those, whether for their kids, whether that is college opportunity, whether it is the life lessons that go along with sport, whether it is the entertainment and health, of being active and being fit, or building social relationships, or whether it's all things combined. The fact that people are willing to pay for that, and the fact that there are people willing to try and provide a better experience by being more educated, commit more of their time to it as coaches and operators, means that the market is there. The market has been created over the last 20 years, and now it is in that consolidation stage. So that's a fact. I don't see any of us, even if we decide to fight it or try to fight it, I don't see anything changing that. You agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, how do you fight it? Like if you wanted to.
You'd have to provide services for free. If there
Correct.
wasn't economic incentive to do it, then you wouldn't have investment coming in.
Correct. And that's not, feasible, obviously.
Right.
Not on a
Right.
large scale. Not on a
Right.
large scale.
So what comes out of this, and you've seen this, right? Because I think there's been waves, even in the last couple of years. There's various waves on this. And one of the operating playbooks is if a big investment, so put yourself in the position of a big firm, one purchase is the club, the operator itself. Another thing that you can purchase is the venue or the facility, right? Another thing that you can purchase is the tournament or the event, the rights, or the rights holder, right? So those are all different things within the space, by the way. The club, the tournament, and the facility are all different pieces of the youth sports industry. And private equity or a big investor may be looking to bring all of them together and consolidate those revenue flows. Then you have the other things attached to it. The last 5 years have seen huge investments in the software space. I mean, you look at like TeamSnap,
Yeah.
right? TeamSnap, you look at Playmetrics, on the club soccer space, but TeamSnap in the communication space. I mean, that app is being used by athletes and sports all over the place. And from a technology perspective, a soccer player is a baseball player, is a basketball player, is a gymnastics athlete, whatever it may be, the need to communicate within the organization is pretty similar, right? And so that's another reason that people are interested in this space is because if you can solve it for one sport, you can solve it for multiple sports, and
Sure.
numbers add up real quickly. So, you look and say, what's going to come out of this? All right. And we are in probably opinion world on that, but I think, and jump in at any point, but I think, operating a club is a really hard thing to do. It's very relationship based. It's very local context dependent. And so, it's not easy to consolidate clubs. It can happen at a local level, I think far easier than it can happen by buying a club in 5 different cities and, 5 different states. It can be done. And if it is, it may provide a better user experience because you have more professional operations or more professional management and process and communications and things like that that make the experience of the end user easier or better,
Yeah.
right? There are positives that can come from it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you
Uh,
have more resources, which I think we'll circle back to as it relates to the league. But yeah, when you're bigger, you in theory have more resources to lean on to provide, if you choose to use those resources to do it, right?
yeah.
To provide better coaching, better,
Better facilities. I mean, you
better
combine
facilities.
clubs
Sure.
and you may be able to provide a much improved facility for training and competition than you could if you were a much smaller organization,
Yeah,
right?
maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Well, you just have the money to put in those 2 new turf fields or 4 new fields, that you
But
didn't
then
have.
the argument to that is if you're larger, you have more teams, and if you that means you require more facilities, bigger facilities. So 2 turf fields probably doesn't get you that far.
Yeah, you
You know
get
what
the
I mean?
point though.
So, but yeah,
It
totally.
it scales up, right? And by getting better processes, getting better facilities, getting better services, all of those things can have a positive effect on the player, the family, the end user, depending on how you phrase it. I think what we've talked about through this and recognizing the inevitability of this is that it's very important to us that as this industry changes, youth soccer people remain in a leadership role in deciding what is happening on the field in terms of the competitive structure, in terms of what does it look like when you step on the field and when you are in the experience of the youth sport, that it's not something that goes from being operated and run by the soccer professional and then it's turned into the hands of the, exaggerate a little bit, but the accountant
Right.
or the executive who's looking at spreadsheets and P&Ls and has no real understanding or care
Yeah.
of what happens on the field.
I need you to grow by 25% next year. Right.
Right, right. And how do you do that? Well, one way you do that is you raise prices. Well, raising prices just to raise prices to drive return, that's not a great thing for the end user, right? If prices are raised because the experience is better, then that's a different question, right? But just raising prices to raise prices, then you get into economic concepts like price elasticity. How much is somebody willing to pay for an experience? That's how most of society functions. I mean, McDonald's figures out the price of the Big Mac, and they're going to price it as high as they can to get you to pay for it.
Yeah.
And at some point, you say it's not worth a Big Mac, right? And then the same thing if you go to Ruth's Chris or whatever your fancy steakhouse is, the same economic model applies. I don't think that extends into youth sports in the same way, right? I don't think either, and again, this is not saying that people should not make a living or make a profit or make a nice living in doing really good things. But it's not just like selling widgets out of a factory.
No. So I want to go back to, and I try not to jump all over the place. When you talk about, because I think this is something that's really important, because I think sometimes this conversation or the conversations about around economics and sports, which could be applied to economics and anything, school, to your point, piano lessons, vacations, whatever. It could be a little taboo on the soccer front for whatever reason. So when you think about because you have kids playing now, and I think
Yeah.
that gives you a new perspective. I have kids playing; it gives you a perspective. Like, first of all, what is important to you as it relates to, let's say, CJ's experience?
Well, I think any parent, and at the risk of being general, right? What you want for your kid is a quote unquote good experience, which means that they learn, they're having fun, and they want to keep doing it and they keep performing better at it. And while they're doing that, they make friends, they learn lessons, all that sort of stuff. And I guess to jump to the end, I think it is you have to be willing to pay for that service if you expect somebody to be very good as a coach or a club as a operator to provide that high level experience. It doesn't come for free because you have the facilities and infrastructure you have to pay for, and you have people's time you have to pay for in doing that. And in some ways, the mantra "you get what you pay for" is
Yeah.
true in anything.
Yeah,
And
it's an
so
in a lot of ways, it's an expert's time. And I know there's varying degrees of expert out there, but it is that's part of it, right? It's
yeah,
not
it's absolutely part of
just
it.
not
And
just any Joe Schmo's time. Because
well, look,
I don't want us to I think sometimes we've looked at the soccer coach, particularly at the club and the youth level, as just some person when the greater majority of these people put a lot of time and effort into getting where they're getting. So
well, if you look, let's look at fundamentally, and again, speaking in generalizations, but the difference between a recreational program within a club and a quote unquote select or competitive program, the two most obvious differences are price. And then generally in the recreational program, you are getting a parent or a volunteer coach that comes with a far lower price than if you are going and paying more to be in a quote unquote higher level, higher commitment, higher expectations, whatever it may be, then you're having to pay for somebody who has put in some time and in education and experience and qualification and all that stuff. That is a fundamental decision that every parent makes when your kids go into sport. And I've had kids in recreational programs in a variety of sports and quote unquote select programs. And there is a dramatic price difference. And there is also a dramatic difference in the experience. And again, one is not right or wrong compared to the other, it is different. And I think as people age, more and more people, if they have the means to do so, which is, that is a tough one, right? Because
yeah,
the reality is the world is economically not the same for everybody. But if they have the means to do so and they can pay for a quote unquote better experience, they will choose to do so and get that better experience for their kid. Now, they may not do that early on when they're young, and they
right.
may not do that for sports that the kid is less quote unquote serious or ambitious about. But and I think most parents would say this regardless of field, if your child shows a love or an interest in something, you try and provide opportunities for them to do that more, do that better, and become better at it because ambition and dreams and all that stuff are a really positive thing for a kid.
Sure. Yeah, and they may change along the way, but yeah, supporting your kids in those is I agree is huge. Um, why do you? This could be a hot question here. So, um, why do you think soccer specifically is has um, taken a I don't know the lion's share of the criticism on this on the
With respect to cost?
yeah with respect to costs? Because I mean I guess I hear it, I maybe hear it from some of my kids friends who play other sports as well, but I don't know, maybe we just live in our own bubble of soccer, so that's where we hear it. But I don't know, what are your thoughts there?
Well, I think that's a good point. I mean, it's not like you or I are talking to a bunch of parents in baseball, or
Yeah,
gymnastics or hockey every day. So we may have a little bit of an echo chamber in
yeah,
that regard. But I also think, if you sort of look at it from a romanticized view, soccer is one of the sports that doesn't demand a huge amount of equipment. I mean, if you're going to be an ice hockey player, you got to invest significantly in skates and pads and everything that goes with it,
oh
and
yeah,
facilities.
yeah,
With soccer, in theory, you need a ball.
yeah,
Maybe add some shin guards, which, can double as, a piece of cardboard shoved down your socks, right? But and I think Jacob, you did a little bit of dirty math on this or back of the envelope math on average cost of sport of a variety of different sports, not just soccer. Do you want to jump in here and give us some of the data that you found?
Yeah, absolutely, I can. So we did go through, we looked at different clubs and different avenues for a bunch of these different sports. And there are some pretty significant price differences. And like you said, a lot of it comes down to equipment, and it comes down to just really how much these families are really going to want to pay. So we looked at pretty much five different clubs from a bunch of these different sports and kind of average them out. But baseball comes out to about 3,800 a year. That's year round. Volleyball is about 3,400 a year. Lacrosse 3,750. But by far the top two in terms of the pricing for the top elite level of them sports. Ice hockey comes out to about 7,800 a year, and that is going to be pretty much on the lower end as well. But before you count tournaments and travel and things like that, and elite gymnastics can cost up to $10,000 a year on average, and there are some that are even higher than that. But from what we saw from
So
soccer,
to
go ahead.
So hold on so just to make sure we outline sort of where you're getting these. You basically did some internet research on this,
Mhm.
identified club programs in each of these sports where their cost structure was publicly available, and more
Correct.
clubs are doing that. And
Mhm.
looking at what is the registration cost or the total anticipated cost of for I would say these are probably in the neighborhood of 11-year-old to 18-year-old, somewhere in that range. These are not your 7 and 8-year-olds generally. Is that a fair statement?
No, yes, it is all
Yeah.
generally looking at the ages that the ECNL plays, 13 to 18, 19s is what we looked at for the age groups. And we tried to pull five clubs that were from different areas of the country. So that way we weren't all just pulling from, New York or California where prices are going to be higher. We wanted to get kind of a representation of different states. So we pulled stuff from Florida, from Missouri in the Midwest, Illinois, Arizona, all across the country to try to find different levels of pricing so that way we could kind of get a
Yeah.
generally statistical significant average from these
Yeah.
five clubs.
Yeah. So we're not going to claim to debate that this is a sample size that merits publication with,
Right.
confidence intervals of 199% or whatever. But
Mhm.
it's a pretty good basic cross section. It feels about right.
Mhm.
And when they're all kind of in the same way, and then you look deeper into soccer, as well, and you looked
Yes.
at the bigger leagues. And
Mhm.
I think in soccer, let's not be very specific to the tune of which one is more expensive by 100 or not, because I
Mhm.
think they all the leagues you looked at fell within the same general frame
Mhm.
of $3,000 to $3,400 basically, in using the
Mhm.
same type of methodology you did in the other sports.
Yeah, and this one's actually went to 10 clubs
So you
for
went to
each of the leagues
10,
that I
10
looked at.
each league.
Right. 10 each league. Again, because this is the space that we operate in, and this is one where we wanted to have kind of a little bit more of a stronger average for these clubs.
Okay. Well, I mean, that I think to your question, Doug, when people say, well, soccer takes a lot of sort of self beatings on cost, and in no way are we minimizing the fact that it's expensive. I mean, I have four kids starting to go into sports, and you start to add $3,000 a kid times four a year. I mean, it's a gigantic
Yeah.
expense. And so nobody's minimizing that. But what we are seeing is that it's fairly consistent, is that regardless of the sport you go into, and then I think gymnastics and hockey, because of the equipment, and maybe gymnastics, when you hear stories of how many hours a day
It's
gymnasts train, it's
insanity.
insane,
It's
you know.
insane.
So there's some variables there that are probably not the same as these other sports, but it is expensive. Now, at the same time, you also did some comparisons of costs of, I guess these would be stereotypical vacations, right, Jacob?
Yes. Yes.
So why don't you go through some of the stereotypical brand name vacations that
Mhm.
everybody would be aware
Mhm.
of?
Yeah, so we looked at, family of four, whether we want to take on vacation, a trip to Disney on average. This is hotels, food, transportation, all of that is about $7,000. And a trip to Universal
And that's not
Studios.
flying there. That's
No.
driving to Disney. Yeah,
Yep. And
go
then
ahead.
Universal is about 6,100. And so again, so both of those are in Orlando, both of those are in California, but generally it's going to cost you around the 6,500 in order to go to vacation there. And then for Legoland and SeaWorld, this is just admission into the parks and some of those expenses because they don't have resorts on site. Both of those were about $700 for essentially a day trip there.
And then all of these guys nicely price an annual pass at, just
Hmm.
enough above that to make you want to go more. But having taken my kids to Legoland a couple times, I can say that $700 for a family of four seems about right.
Hmm.
A lot. I've been to Legoland as well. It's yeah, it's a lot.
So I mean, the point of this is in saying, and again, there's always going to be something that is, there's going to be an outlier. There's going to be the club that charges a lot more than that. And for one reason or another, they are able to do so. And there's going to be the club who charges a lot less than that, right? Because they have other funding and they have some charitable arm or whatever it may be. But the point is the cost structure generally looks to be pretty similar across these sports. By the time you add in people's time, facility needs, equipment needs, you're in a range. And when you compare that, I mean, I guess by my math, then five family trips to Legoland gets me one kid's sporting experience for the year, based on the numbers that you just gave. It's not cheap to raise kids in this country, that's for sure.
But I think you go back to, I think if I go back and think about, why I want my kids doing it, right? It's your point, it's that experience, it's the teamwork, it's the all the things that you learn. Um, there's no, I'm not I'm not investing in my kids' soccer future. Now it may work out that he goes and plays and beyond, his youth experience, but that's not really my hope for him. My hope is I'm investing in his development as a human. right?
Yes, and I think what we're saying on that is, first of all, if you're investing in this with the expectation of some type of economic return, that's, I mean, I dare say it crazy, but it
Yeah.
is.
Yes.
But what we are saying is that you are investing in an experience that may have longer term opportunity associated with it in terms of playing, as they get older into high school, college, and a very, very, very tiny few beyond that. But you are paying for and investing in the experience on a daily basis of being a part of a team, learning lessons in sport, building friendships, learning to be fit and to eat well, learning what it's like to compete and be resilient. And then also, you're developing some skills that hopefully become a lifelong passion and activity for you as a kid, young adult, and then adults to continue to be able to participate.
And I would add to that, my youngest has taken up golf. Um,
Well, golf would
he
be on the high end here, I
yeah,
think. We
yes,
didn't do that.
yes, it would. Um, we're lucky we have a very affordable little community golf course near us. Um, and then I would say the same thing about my soccer playing son. It has provided me, and I know their mom, the opportunity to spend time with them.
Good
Whether
point.
it be going on the road and experiencing that with them together. So just more quality time. I went and played golf with my youngest son yesterday, and we had 3 hours together. He's not looking at his phone, and we're just talking. And I think that's another important part of this is the connection. If you allow it to be that part of that part of the experience. I mean, obviously, if you're browbeating your kid about how they're playing and what their results are, it probably doesn't end up how you would hope. But I think just having those opportunities to spend time with your kids is also, I think, really important. So I guess if you had a crystal ball and you thought about what the future looks like as it relates to the economics of all this, what do you think?
Well, I mean, again, I'll start with the inevitability of this, and we're in the middle of it. And people can say, hey, one of the things we've done in some ways is consolidate event operations. I mean, we operate 50 something events a year, and that number is going up. The more events you operate, by the way, the more efficient you can be at operating events, right? The
Yeah.
better you are at it, and the cost structure becomes more controllable in that. And if you have a controllable cost structure and experience and expertise at it, you provide a better experience, right? And again, most Americans and most things don't pay for things they don't like, right? So if you provide a good experience, the consumer wants that experience. And so I think in some ways, some of the consolidation will drive improved experiences. Now, again, I go back to, and it's our first value as a league. We talked about this a lot, but youth soccer should be led by experts in youth soccer who understand its unique culture, ecosystem, challenges, needs, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I think as economic forces come in here and as more economic reality starts to drive decisions, it's really important that the soccer people are still structuring soccer. We don't want soccer to turn into any other commercialized industry in that regard. We want soccer experts, to be in a very big role in this. I think that demands a new skill set from what you would call your typical soccer expert. They're going to have to become more sophisticated with respect to business operations in order to maintain a seat at that table. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah. I mean, change or die, I think is, always a mantra that I go by, and you have to understand the moment that you're in and, you know, rise to whatever that moment is and improve or make the adjustments that need to be made in order for you to be successful in that moment. And I think this is we've talked about this before, but it's a big lesson about what happened in the past of why certain things failed. because they didn't change and they didn't rise to the moment when the moment arrived, right? So
Yeah, and to the single operator or the sole operator who wants to maintain that independence, which is great because, and I've said this probably multiple times on this, but we've had lots of conversations about this.
yeah,
I think having competition between clubs is really important, and I think
yeah,
it's better to have a couple of clubs in a city competing than just have one club owning everything. But if you want to be the sole operator and maintain that independence, it is going to force you to improve and adapt your business model and your service model. And that means, when we can say things like service model, it sounds very corporate. But ultimately, what that means is improve the quality of the coaching, improve the quality of the experience that you're offering to people, because there is a smarter competitor coming. There is a bigger competitor coming. There is a more efficient competitor coming, whatever word you want to use, that competition level is going to force you to improve by its nature.
yeah. And I think we all have, you know, I think there's a few different types of these businesses as it relates to youth soccer at the club level. For us here, like we've always, you know, purposely kind of kept it smaller. Um, we haven't merged with anybody or, changed our name or affiliated with anybody, right? We've kind of tried to keep that small, I would say like boutique kind of feel to what we do. That's just our choice. I mean, not that any other way is right or wrong. But if you are smaller, then it does push you to look at yourself frequently and say, is what we're doing good enough? Does it meet the challenge of this day and this age of what we're competing against?
Well, and to that point, there are going to be the bigger, smarter, whatever you want to call it, bigger for sure, competitors who don't do as good of a job, that
Yeah,
do generalize or commoditize the experience of the youth soccer family or youth sports family, and that's going to have blowback, right? And that's going to create an opportunity for those clubs that are uniquely individualized and high quality in their service in comparison to sort of the corporate behemoth.
yeah. Look at this from the league's perspective. So, I mean, as you know, this is the ECNL podcast. So, how do you think this affects the ECNL and how we look at it going forward?
Well, I mean, again, in some ways, people could say we are we are driving in some way the consolidation at a league level. Again, we didn't create it. I think it was the opportunity was created by the fracturing of the USYS monopoly, which was created by the Development Academy. Then that created an opening for a better league product where it was very hard to fight the monopoly. That grew into a huge amount of new leagues, U.S. club soccer being probably the driver of a lot of those initially, and then you start to see other member organizations starting popping up here and there. I think that's reached from a U.S. soccer member organization perspective. You're probably past peak on that. I don't think you're going to see a lot of new of that. But what you are now starting to see is as these dozens and dozens of new leagues, hundreds of new leagues across the country have been formed, now they're starting to consolidate again. Whether that consolidation is under trademark or whether it's under operational control or a little bit of both is happening. We're engaging in that. And again, we would put our league hat on and say, well, we think what we're doing is improving the sport. We
Yeah,
think by providing the league product and service that we do, it's making a better experience for the end user. But at the same time, we talk about this all the time internally with our leadership team. We don't have any inherent right to that. It's competitive. And the second that we believe our own press or we start acting like the monopoly, then we will be vulnerable to the next competitor who comes. So I think we're in that space and we're looking as you would. I mean, we've done a lot at 13 to 18, and now we're looking at U12 and down and saying, how do we make that space better? Because even just within the very, very microcosm, I mean, this is like a chaos theory and fractals, right? So you go from all industries, are function like this economically. Then we're looking at use sports and how that looks. And then we're looking at use soccer and it still looks the same. And then now we're looking down into zone one and saying, okay, the same issues exist there.
Yeah.
It needs to be better, and it's very inefficient and it's very fragmented. And so what can we do to provide better support for it? And again, that doesn't always mean operating it, right? I mean, you see some of you'll see these on social media, the pitches by some of these professional services firms. Let us take your business processes of accounting and payroll and finance so you can just focus on the coaching, right? That's a sort of a sly way of saying, let's buy the business and you can just coach and we'll run the business, right?
Yeah, right.
Which, believe that or not, but they're all this stuff is going to change what we do, and we're going to have to adapt to it. And we're facing competitors that are doing the same thing now, so I think it's going to continue to happen, that some good, some bad. I think there's huge values to having new capital that comes in because you can use that to do better things. But again, I've said this in multiple environments, and maybe I'll finish it here, which and this is a little bit of a play on words, but we try and drive a sports-driven business, which means that what's good for the sport is the primary decision driver. And then you have a business that supports that. And anyone who says that a business is a bad thing doesn't understand economics and operations, because you have to have resources in order to pay people and provide opportunity and provide services. So we try to be driven by sport-based decisions and values. And that's very much in contrast to a business in sport.
Right. Those don't necessarily always equal the best business outcome.
Correct. There's times we say this is what's right for the sport, for the player, for the club, for whatever, and it's going to be more expensive or more inefficient or whatever, but it's what's right.
That's right.
But and so to do that play on words of a sports-driven business or a business in sport, and a business in sport is driven by spreadsheets and P&Ls. That says what is most going to drive the decision is what drops to the bottom line and how do we maximize that. And then we figure out and back into the sport how to get there versus what does the sport need, and then how do we price that so that we actually can exist to do it. And by existing to do it, there needs to be a return because there's risk in business. And if there's not a return and you have a down year because things get canceled, or a pandemic happens or anything like that, then you're out of business.
Yeah, right.
And then you can't provide the service that you feel is actually valuable. And that's kind of the world that we live in now.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to wrap it, and well said. It's a complex conversation, but thought, we needed to have it, and so it was good. All right, now let me hear from our sponsors, and then we'll get into Bracken Brainbuster. We got the whole crew here today, too. By the way,
it's a rare occasion.
I know we got Reed, we got Dean here, so we got I got a good question for the day. Discount Tire, want the same expert advice from the pros at a discount tire store while shopping online? Meet Treadwell, your personal tire guide. Whether you're driving to practice or game day, Treadwell gives you tire recommendations based on your vehicle location and driving habits. Get matched with the perfect tires so you can stay focused on the goals that matter most. Shop with Treadwell at discounttire.com. Take your training to the next level with Quick Goals, full range of professional quality equipment from training goals, cones, mannequins, and more. Shop now and save 25% with code ECNL25 at checkout. Did you know that ECNL provides free recovery sessions? ECNL has partnered with Mark Pro, a staple for recovery in professional sports. Mark Pro is a unique, safe, portable e-stim device that feeds sore muscles and removes metabolic waste. Stop by the recovery zone during our next event. Okay, Bracken Brainbuster for today. Everybody get ready. It's going to be a tough question maybe for some of us. We'll see. But the question is, will the U.S. ever produce a Ballon d'Or level player. For those of you guys who don't know, the Ballon d'Or is pretty universally recognized as the award for the best player in the world in a given year. And what has to change to make that happen? Dean Linke, I don't know the next time I'm going to see you, so you're going first.
Yeah. Well, Lynn, I feel like I live in the land of optimism, and I'm going to say absolutely, it will happen. And obviously, I think it's going to probably take something similar to what they did when they almost made the semifinals when we got ripped off against Germany.
Totally got ripped off.
Yeah.
Totally
got ripped off. I mean, in that tournament, Claudia Reina was brilliant and probably could have been considered as well. Our goalkeeper was brilliant. So I absolutely think it's going to happen. Is it still going to take a little while? For sure, but it will happen.
Okay. Love that. Jacob Bourne.
I am going to agree with Dean in the sense that I think in the law of averages, at some point there has to be an American that wins a Ballon d'Or.
That's less optimistic.
Wow.
You just went to math.
But I will say this though, I think athletes now today are the best athletes that soccer have been, and that is going to continue to progress forward in the sense that athletes are going to continue to get better and better. I think with individual training, nutrition, things like that, eventually there's going to be an American athlete that is going to come out and blow the doors off the world. I think the number one thing that needs to happen, and I think it's been said multiple times on this podcast as well, is getting more players to play outside of their club environments, playing in backyards, playing on school grounds, things like that, because that is where you do the most developmental outside of the sport. And I think that's how you're going to be able to get the creativeness in order to be a world-class player.
Okay. Reed Sellers.
Got to stick along the lines of optimism here, and again, going to absolutely say it will happen. I think sooner than we think too. And in terms of what has to change, I'm gonna agree with Jacob. It's only a matter of like playing environment and stuff like that. The more you can get out, the more you can face adversity, um, just new challenges and stuff. I think that's what it really comes down to. So it will definitely happen. I'm gonna say within the next 20 years. So
Next
That's not
20
very
years.
optimistic either, man. Holy cow.
it's gonna happen.
All right, Lavers. What do you got?
I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
I'm going to be very prescriptive.
By the way, can I just say this because I did not say this, and I need to say this to give proper respect. We have had that level player on the women's side. Now I'm not sure, Dean, you might be able to check me on this. Maybe not a Ballon d'Or winner because they did not have the women's Ballon d'Or at the time. But I do think FIFA Women's Player of the Year we have had on the women's side. So I want to give due respect to the women who've come out of this country and been absolutely world-class players. And I'm talking about this on the men's side. So let me just check myself right there.
Yeah, because I'm certain Carly has won it.
Yeah.
Like Rapinoe may have won it as well.
Yeah,
But
agreed.
I know Carly did. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Lavers.
All right. So I'm going to go back. My answer is yes.
Okay,
I'm going to be
cool.
very prescriptive, and I'm maybe throw some darts on the board. Number one, we need to reevaluate the playing structure of our U10 and down and play with less players on the field.
Ooh, okay. I like this. I like this prescription.
Number two, we need more Americans playing college soccer.
Okay. I like that. Too many internationals currently.
Number three, we need more professional soccer clubs with opportunity to move up a pyramid.
Okay.
Number
like-
four,
Is that like pro rel kind of thing?
there needs to be more clubs. I mean, you look in Europe, there's so many clubs in every city, and there's so much opportunity.
Yeah.
And here we have that at a youth level. We do not have that at a pro level or a college level. I mean, if
It's
you
happening
look,
at it's happening at the pro level, Christian. I mean, USL 2 is adding like 11 more teams, and USL Championship's adding
yeah,
three
but it's still
teams.
we're a continent, Dean, and some of these teams are still very USL two is still very. Gosh, that's an amorphous concept of what is USL
USL
two.
League One, I meant. USL
Yeah,
League One.
USL one's growing, yes, and that's a
Yeah.
good thing, but it's still not enough. I mean, you can still be in large parts of this country and not have a pro team within. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, you can still not have a pro team within hundreds of miles in lots of parts of this country. And so I think you need more of that because I'm a big fan of the sort of petri dish analogy of if a bunch of different people have opportunity to build a soccer program at a pro level and can earn their way up in some way. And I'm not going to become a pro rel zealot. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying if you do, let's say this in USL 1, if you do really well in USL 1, there needs to be some type of economic return for that. That number, you can make that commercially successful at the USL 1 level, but then you have the opportunity to invest more and play in a bigger stadium against better level of competition, whether that's a USL championship or something else. The last thing, number 4, is I think we still need much better grassroots coaching education for the entry level, the 12 and down, that is still driven a lot by volunteer parents or young coaches, new coaches who teaching, if anyone who's done this, it is a heck of a lot harder to teach a 9, 10, 11-year-old basic concepts of like how do you play a 2v2 than it is to teach an 18-year-old how to defend in a back four. So I'll go back. You need better game formats than the young. You need college soccer to be more inclusive of the American player. You need more pro teams with the ability to move up some type of ladder. And you need more coach education that meets the level of Zone 1.
I will also say
Um,
USL is introducing Pro Rel in 27-28 across USL Championship, League One, and League Two.
I'll believe it when we see it, Jacob.
yep. I'm going to just say no, and we're going to close the show. No, I'm
Wow.
kidding. I'm kidding. I should have known that to let Lavers go last on this because now I'm stuck in a spot where I have to try to respond to that. But he has like a written plan. He did not know this ahead of time. Well done on your feet. I'll say yes. I'm going to add to what you said, Christian. The one thing I would add is in our American professional leagues, USL, MLS, we should have some requirements for US players playing in those leagues as well.
Absolutely.
So just kind of similar to what you said about the college soccer, but there has to be some ability and requirement to play the American player and give those players that experience at that level. So I'll say yes. I don't know.
What a group of optimists we all
Hopefully
are.
it'll be in our lifetime as well. But again, I do want to say I'm sorry if I meant because we have
Oh, come on.
produced
We
some
know.
unbelievable
We
players,
know.
but the women's players who have been the
Listen,
best
and
players in
the
world.
level of the women's game all over the world's getting
Yeah, no
higher
question.
and better. So to continue that, there's going to need to be continued change also in the women's game, which is obviously a lot of people are talking about that because
Yeah,
the game is getting better everywhere as other countries invest in it for the first time.
yeah, totally agree. Good stuff. I finally
All
came
right.
with a really good question. I felt
That
like
was a good inning. I think
I really thought about it. I thought
need
about
more.
that one a lot.
We
need
need more
better?
Bracken brain busters like that. I mean, because I think we left here with some inspiration on that. But thank you for that. Thank you,
Yeah.
Jacob, for all the prep on this episode. It's a meaty episode. A lot of things to think about in that episode, and you need to have more than a 40-character response to solve these issues.
Yes, you do.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate
All right.
it.
See you in a couple weeks, everybody.
All right.